presentation.
Yeah. I hope you guys can hear me. And thank you, Prof. It's a pleasure to meet the Aga Khan researchers and team. We worked with you, Prof, here before you moved to Aga Khan, but we are still in touch. Just to start off, I'm not going to have slides because I want to make this, very personal, just to give a sense of my journey and how I got into, where I am, and to also actually just say that it has been enjoyable, interesting, sometimes difficult, sometimes disappointing, but overall, my journey has been very nice to me. I should start by saying that I went to primary school in a very dry area, Magadi Primary School. Maybe some of you know it, very small. That's where my dad was working as an electrician. After finishing Magadi Primary School, I went to Alliance High School. I was there when Alliance was really Alliance, not the way it is now, overcrowded and looking very ugly. I did my 4 years, I went back, I did my high school, and then I joined University of Nairobi as a medical student. I used to be in Hall 3. So those of you who are in university and have been in Hall 3, then we share some commonality. Those who have been at Alliance High School, we also share some commonality. I was in Selwood House, one of the good houses. I also was a school captain when I left Alliance. So I have really had a good life. I joined the University of Nairobi. I finished as a medical doctor. I did my internship in Machakos, my 1 year, got registered. I was then posted to Eldoret to work as a medical officer. This now was towards the end of 89. So I used to, then they posted me to Kapsabet. So I used to work in Kapsabet and Nandi Hills Hospital doing the things that medical officers do. But it was at this point that things changed. Those of you who have been in medical school can remember Professor Achola Ndinya. And those of you who have had a contact with Canadians can also remember the late Professor Frank Plummer. For one reason, Frank Plummer and Achola Ndinya came to Eldoret to give a continuing medical education. And they were talking about sexually transmitted infections. This was in 1989. I happened to be in the congregation. And interesting enough, that week, I had actually seen a patient in Nandi Hills with a huge genital ulcer. I really couldn't make sense of what it was at that time. It looked, I wish I could show you the pictures, but I avoided that. It looked, really caseating. It looked, like cancerous, but not cancerous. But when they presented their presentation and they mentioned chancroid, Haemophilus ducrei, is when it occurred to me, wow, this is what it was. I'd never seen that in medical school. And during the discussion, then the interest started there. I talked to Achola a little bit. I talked to Frank Plummer, and they told me, oh, you can come and do research. I applied. I was taken to the Department of Medical Microbiology and then got into the research they were doing, looking at STIs, looking at HIV, looking at chlamydia, looking at gonorrhea, and then I got a scholarship to go and do infectious diseases in Canada, but I took a break and did an epidemiology at Tufts University in Boston, and then headed to University of Manitoba to do infectious disease. I finished that, and then did my PhD, finished that. And then in 1997, 98, I headed to University of Oxford in London to do my postdoc, to look at more details, virology and immunology. And that's when we developed our first vaccine with Oxford. And that was the creation of CAVI Institute of Clinical Research. But what I want to tease you guys is that people forget about STIs. STIs have not gone away. We are still looking at STIs now, and more so gonorrhea, because gonorrhea is becoming resistant to antimicrobials. That's a huge research area, ladies and gentlemen. Even now, there is money outside there of somebody who can develop a vaccine for gonorrhea and a vaccine for chlamydia. So as I talk this, I hope I'm giving you tips of research areas, that are still virgin. I think we jump onto HIV, we jump onto COVID, because it seems to be the in thing at this point in time, but we have never had a vaccine for chlamydia. Chlamydia is a problem. If you checked at any population, you'll actually find a prevalence of 16 to 18% chlamydia, with consequences of PID and issues of secondary infertility, major problems. You only need to go to an infertility clinic, and what you'll be looking at are consequences of gonorrhea and chlamydia. Ladies and gentlemen, those things have not gone away. Those are areas we still face. Those are the problems we still have. So those are tips that I can give you. We tried making a chlamydia vaccine when I was doing my my PhD. We were almost there, but things happened. We have been trying to make a vaccine with my colleagues quietly for gonorrhea. Again, those who have studied gonorrhea realize about strain variability in gonorrhea, but those are areas of real interest. So as you can see from where I come from, I'm a medical doctor with a PhD. I've had a lot of issues with medical doctors saying, oh, we train a lot, oh, we do all these things, we cannot do PhDs. That is not true. I did it. You guys can do it. And if we really want Africa to develop, we must approach research to the highest level. We need all of us. We need epidemiologists. We need we need basic scientists. We need people who really can dissect antigens to their smallest molecules, because that's where discovery will actually come from. So for us here, that's what I've tried to push. That's what I want to see. And I would like to tease Aga Khan. University of Nairobi has failed to really develop a good biotech. Prof, you and your colleagues can begin to think seriously of an offshoot of a biotech that can begin to make products for development. That is actually my biggest next desire. People say that research is not rewarding. Research is very rewarding. I'm not poor. I have done very well, to say the truth, even if somebody doesn't tell me. I think Professor Macharia knows me very well. I've done very well. I've never done any private practice. My work has been academia and research, and I've actually done very well. Some people feel envious because of that, because they don't understand, but it's because research rewards when you concentrate, write proposals, win some, lose some, progress. So you can see my progression to the level where I came back to Kenya in 1998, and we started establishing CAVI. We were just 3 of us. I used to occupy an office like this, 3 of us, when we started developing CAVI as a research unit. Then we grew. Then in 2013, we developed CAVI now as an institute. Now we occupy 3 floors. I was the first director of CAVI from 2013 to 2017. And then from 2017, somebody else took over. But really, again, the pride I have is the legacy I've left behind. CAVI is here. CAVI will stand. We have expanded to do more than just HIV. Prof. Machari has just told you about the Ebola trial we just conducted. We are now looking into other things, and we are looking for more people to join other thematic areas other than just infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, issues to do with cancer. And then also, one of the best things about research has been the opportunity to network, the opportunity to travel. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that there's any bit of Africa I've not traveled. I don't think there's any bit of the world that I've not traveled. I've been to the northmost area where it is all dark during winter, thanks to research, and it is all daylight during the summer, thanks to winter. So I've had a very good life in terms of doing research. So if you want to really build a career in research, some of the things that you really need to look at are the job responsibilities, the work environment, the skills required, your personal qualities, the work values, qualifications, job titles, career progression, potential pay, and all these other things. So those are the things, ladies and gentlemen, you need to look at very, very critically. But the whole issue is that they say certain things that coming together is a beginning. Working together is progress, and staying together is actually success. What that statement means is network and collaboration. I will not be where I am now had I not collaborated. And I have a huge network of collaborators from India to South Africa to North. Maybe the only place in the world I've never got a proper collaborator is South America. But in all parts of the world, we have collaborators. So first and foremost, those are the things I've said in terms of growing, but the next thing is network. You cannot do the kind of research we do these days without collaboration. You cannot be a lone ranger. So even in Aga Khan, begin to set yourselves in networks. Begin to apply in groups, not as single individuals. Begin to encompass research holistically. Because anytime, the reason why we succeed at CAVI, when we begin to look at a topic, we look at a topic holistically. For example, we shall look at all aspects of basic science, all aspects of social science, and maybe even the economics that goes with it. And also these days is a whole issue is that, is your research going to influence policy? But policy may not be the major thing. Is your research going to influence practice? So for the last decade, research has changed. Funding is tight, but networks are the things that are actually going to make you succeed. So look for people who think like you. And when you are forming a network, look for people who think like you, people who move like you, people you have some commonalities, people who have a heightened sense of inquiry. The problems I've had with our colleagues in the medical profession is to accept things as they are, to never question. And I'll give you an example. A patient comes in with fever, you find it's malaria. Then you go home. Who says that infections at any one time can only be one at a time? Work that we have been doing in Busia, we're finding fever, somebody has malaria, somebody has Nile fever, and somebody has onyonyo. That is the approach. So when you hear, oh, this patient has malaria, there was fever, you go home, the fever is not improving, then you look for the next thing, then you look for the next thing. Why can't you have that mind of inquiry and begin to say, we see patients who are coming in with fever, but these are the 3 common causes of fever. So when we are looking, we'll do a multiplex to look for these things at the same time. That is the thinking, the inquiry. Never satisfied with enough, because it's never enough. If you're satisfied with enough, you are not growing. And those are the things I want to inculcate in you young people, that at any one time, ask and never stop asking. And that's what I try to do also to my postgraduate students I have here, that let's keep asking. The other aspect of it is what were some of the highlights in my career? Very interesting. When I came back to the College of Health Sciences and I joined Department of Medical Microbiology, a senior colleague of mine, senior colleague because he was my teacher, met me in the corridors and said, oh, Anzala, you are back, yeah, which department are you? Then I said, medical microbiology. Then he said, oh my God, you are going to medical microbiology. There is nothing there. there is nothing there, because he was a surgeon. So I went home and I thought, hey, have I made the wrong choice? Because he told me there is nothing there. He was a big surgeon doing great things in orthopedic surgery. So I went home, I thought, have I made a mistake? But anyway, I soldiered on. You know, when I look back, that's when I realized that in all these arms of medicine, there is something in there. And in medical school, when we went through virology, actually, at the medical school, when I was going through medical school, we only had 2 or 3 lessons in virology. And then immunology was a bit haphazard. It was not really taught, very well. But when I was getting into medical microbiology as a tutorial fellow at that time, I really didn't know all these things. It was an issue of interest, but I also didn't know exactly where I was going. But when I got into Canada and I saw the way people are looking at virology, the way people are looking at immunology, then I got a sense that, well, we were missing something. And you can actually see what viruses have become. I'm sure those of you now who are looking at immunology is not just B cells and T cells. Immunology is just a wonderful world, to be in, from immunology itself to discovery, to understanding cancer, to understanding everything that a human being really is in terms of infection, in terms of just normal, even cardiovascular, obesity, all these things, there is an arm of immunology. So when one of my highlights then was that microbiology, hey, Anzala, you are going to be very poor. I'm not poor. But it is my persistence and just saying this is what I've chosen, even if I don't know where I'm going right now. In time, I now realized the decision I made was actually a wise decision. Maybe it was not informed by anything at that time, but it is some of those things when you say, well, I've made this decision, let me pursue where I'm going. So that was one of the highlights. The other highlights that was critical is when I came back, we established CAVI and we said, oh, we need to do a clinical trial. And what was a clinical trial? We had just developed a vaccine with Oxford, and we needed to test it here in Kenya. So we said, we have written the protocol, we submitted to the ethics. The ethics had no capacity to review the protocol. They told us, hey, Professor Anzala, we were with, I was a doctor then, I wasn't a professor, but we were with Professor Boyo, the late Boyo, Professor Chola. They told us this can only be approved in the office of the president. Very interesting. We had given to the ethics committee, they said, we can't, we don't have capacity, office of the president. So we carried these volumes. I remember myself with the late Professor Boyo. We went to the office of the president. We presented to the PS. So the PS was wondering, what do you guys want us to do? So we said, we were told to bring it here. So they stamped it and gave us a permit. All right? Then now we said, oh, now we have a permit to do, the research. How do we bring in the product? So we went to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, but at least at the Pharmacy and the Poisons Board, there was a bit of procedure. They told us, oh, you need a permit to import the investigational product. Another good highlight. So we did that. And what we did at that time actually led to establishment of doing clinical trials in Kenya and in Africa. Actually, Kenya was the second country to do clinical trials on investigation of product. Uganda had just started before us. But then with that, we developed the structure of how to review these protocols, what to do when you go to the ministry, what to do when you go to PPB. So then they did away with the office of the president. So again, there, we were not really shaping policy, we were actually shaping practice. Now you can easily conduct a clinical trial of a new product. I'm sure Aga Khan has a process. You'll end up at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. They look at all the dossier. You'll get your permit to import the product, and you actually start work. And now there is even local registration, so that any clinical trial you are doing, regardless of whether it is vaccine or drug or repurposed drug, you can actually register that within the PPB and the NACOSTI. So this is really my pride, that it was uncharted territory, but we have informed practice. It is now straightforward and very easy to actually do that. Some of the most interesting things was when our own colleagues, when we started we are going to conduct a clinical trial on vaccines. Then most doctors, the only, I'm sorry to say, the only vaccine they knew is a live attenuated. The measles vaccines and the polio vaccines. So when we started talking that this is not live attenuated, this is a recombinant, non-replicating, then they were wondering, what are you guys talking about? Because for them, vaccines were nothing other than live attenuated. And I'm glad now, that's what I'm telling you, immunology has really grown. You are hearing of platforms like mRNA vaccines. You are hearing platforms like replicating mRNA. You are hearing platforms like nanoparticles. You are hearing recombinants, and recombinants, we are talking of non-replicating, we are talking of replicating. So you can actually see, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a nice time. We have good science we can actually discuss. And some of these things are the things we are actually doing at CAVI. At CAVI here, we can actually look at the highlights is when we brought in a confocal microscope that we can actually look at explants. That's another highlight, explants. Explants is exactly, instead of looking at tissue, instead of looking at cells on a petri dish, you are actually looking at tissue. You get tissue, you slice tissue in small bits, you grow it in culture, and you can actually look at how the virus penetrates that tissue live. You stain the virus particle, and you light it up, and over a period of days, you can be looking at that tissue under a microscope and actually see how the virus penetrates, which cells the virus is binding. And with this kind of technology, you can actually then put in interventions. You can put in antiretroviral drugs and you see whether they actually stop replication. You can actually put in antibodies and you see actually whether they can bind to the virus and stop the virus from infecting cells. So those of you who are in science now, you are in science at a very good time. for me, this is the technology that I had to work very hard to transfer it here, and it is here now. The other good aspects is sequencing. We now have ability to use what we call nanopore Oxford sequencing, where we can actually sequence huge chunks. We just completed sequencing gonorrhea, resistant gonorrhea. We are now looking at bioinformatics, just to look at whether that resistance is known mutations or whether they are actually new mutations that we don't know of. So we are in very nice time. So I have so many nice highlights I can present to you, but this is the area I want to interest you. You can only do that if you go to the basics. As a doctor, you can do your PhD in basic science. As a doctor, you can do these things I'm telling you because I'm not doing them in Europe. I am actually doing them here. So the next big highlight, we now want to move into product development. When we sequence gonorrhea to the bits, can bioinformatics tell us whether we can use that information to develop point-of-care diagnostics, to point out areas where we can use to highlight the areas that will be of interest for vaccine development, areas that will be of interest for drug development. This is now my next big frontier. But I'm now reached an age whereby I must be handing over to the next level of generation. Just because you are in Aga Khan does not stop you from collaborating with us. And I've told you, we must collaborate. We don't have any projects, joint projects with Aga Khan, other than maybe the antimicrobial resistant work that is going on now. But that is more of a program, right? My interest is really to dissect these things to the minutest level so that we can now begin to develop products in a biotechnology way. So Prof. Macharia, let's begin to think of the next big grant. Let's begin to think of how we can write this next big grant jointly so that we can influence the next generation to begin to think at that level of basic science, but also basic science, not just for publication and abstracts, but basic science for purposes of product developments. So skills. In basic science, there are so many aspects of skills. You can hone down in immunology. You can hone down on virology and look at virology in minute levels. You can hone down on bioinformatics and look at bioinformatics at the lowest level. You can look at modeling and try to understand medical modeling and epidemiology to help us understand where we are going to be 5-6 years from now. You can begin to look at entomology from the point of, because sometimes medical doctors don't think that entomology is important, but it is critical. Because when we look at the environment, I can simply tell you that it is interesting to look at vectors because we are actually seeing malaria, we are actually seeing vectors, like Anopheles carrying 2 infectious agents at the same time. We actually dissected some Anopheles and we found that it was carrying malaria plus some other viruses at the same time. So then what does it mean, for an impending, outbreak? So those things can be done by us. And because you are a medical doctor, it puts you in a better position to interpret that data than just a basic scientist who doesn't have a medical background. So part of what has really helped me succeed is actually having that aspect of understanding medicine to the core, but also bringing in basic science understanding, to the core. It took me from my master's to a PhD was a period of about 9 years of continuous reading, hard work, and ensuring that we pass exams. And the 9 years is not too long for those of us, and we are still alive now, but also taking into account, Professor Macharia, that now we are living longer. When I was in Canada and I was beginning as a master's student, there were professors there who were 80 years old and still very, very active. So sometimes medical doctors say, oh, I'm going to be in school for long. Oh, no. It's not too long. 9 years, I've been there. And I believe I'm still young enough. I can still jog. I'm sure Professor Macharia has seen me jogging. So you can do it. You can do it. So those are really the areas, that we really want you to look at critically, to push critically, and to ensure that we begin to build a really a concrete mass of very well-educated Kenyans who understand medicine, who can do basic science, who can do good epidemiology, who can do good modeling, who understand, cardiovascular disease, but ask very basic, questions and things, of that nature. For example, we have been seeing esophageal cancer coming from certain regions in this country. I have never seen somebody asking, is it the soil? Is it the food? Our interest is just to cut and say this is cancer, we treat. But where I'm coming from is that I want us to move upstream and understand that environment if it is, and say, can we put in preventive measures? Let us not be the kind of doctors who sit in the hospitals and wait for patients to get sick. No, that's not the direction we want to take. The direction we want to take is to think upstream. If it's in Nyeri, is it the soil? Is it anything to do with aflatoxins? Or is it something else? And if it is, what can we do upstream in terms of prevention? So that's really areas where I really want us to come from. Even the cervical cancer. Is it just HPV? Or is there a combination of HPV and CMV? So that even if we are controlling for HPV, could there be something else that we are leaving out? Could it be host? Could we look at the various markers in these individuals? Can we begin to look at the African genome and begin to tease out whether there are any telltale features in the African genome that predisposes us to certain non-communicable diseases? Gentlemen, those answers cannot come from Europe. Those answers need to come from us.
Professor Anzala, thank you so much for that excellent presentation, keynote address.
I have not finished. I have not finished. Okay. All right, I have not finished. So really, I was told it is up to 6:30, or mine was only short.
So, Prof, we have another session, and then.
Okay, so let me just conclude. I can come up back again, but this is my prayer, ladies and gentlemen. We have the capacity. We need the critical mass. Stop sitting in hospitals and waiting, for patients to get sick and come there. Let's begin to look at what we can do real upstream. But that, in a nutshell, is really my journey. And it's a wonderful journey. I've enjoyed it. There have been lows, but most of the time we have had highs. It pays good in research. You can succeed in research. We don't have all to be in private practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very